I was curious how to translate the title.
Yeah, it's a weird one.
Negative space makes the most sense, but then I started to reconsider that after I saw the last episode where they referenced the title.
Maybe it's erasy space.
So there is no like official translation.
No.
I think I saw it somewhere as erased space. Erased,
yeah, but that's too
tense.
literal, I think.
Uh-huh.
Because that doesn't mean anything.
No.
Yeah. Google Translate says deleted space.
Yeah.
Deleted space.
So
Well,
we'll just call it, I think negative space.
I like negative
makes
space.
the most sense.
But I mean,
it was a
like
very
as a
negative
literary
space.
translation.
but it means like a clear space, like a empty space, like the Yugoslavs were shot at some point. Like now I watched the documentary, so I'm confusing the documentary and the film. But like it's a clear space where some people got shot, like who were ambushed or something like that.
Yeah.
You know?
It might come from military terminology.
Yeah.
In which
like
case,
the killing zone or something, or
I mean, I think it just means I think what it means is a space where you don't have any cover for yourself. Like you end up in Brisani Prostor and you're like easily shot by the enemy or something like that.
Yeah. There's a term for that. And it isn't just open space. Wide open.
I think it's out in the open.
Out in the open.
Yeah.
But
maybe that does indicate danger. Yeah.
I don't know if there's maybe there's a more precise military term.
Well, let me ask my new best friend, the Bing chat guy.
So
maybe out in the open, I think.
Well, actually, okay. So this is I don't know why, but the American movie Point Blank was translated as Brisani Prostor in Yugoslavia.
That's
weird.
The term is actually killing field, which actually does sum up the movie pretty well.
It does, but maybe out in the open.
Yeah, well, I mean, we can say all of these things.
Yeah, I mean, we're recording all this, so
that's true. Yeah,
I mean, we already said all of these things.
Yeah,
I'll just put the theme song behind it. We'll call it a cold open. Yeah. The out in the open theme song, which is a lot like our theme song.
Yes. Because out in the open, it implies that you're like vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would feel pretty vulnerable in something called a killing field, though.
But a killing field like implies, I think, a little
execution
bit more,
or something.
Yeah, like the killing fields of Cambodia or something.
Yeah.
You know, and that's definitely not what's. I mean, a lot of them do die.
Although, according to them, it kind of was that because the Ustashas emigration claimed that most of them were executed after being captured.
Right.
Yeah.
Although a bunch of them were put on trial, so
I think only 2 or something like that. I don't know.
No, more than that.
Wondering what the listener is thinking right now. Like, oh my God, what is going to happen today? Sounds horrible.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's another Ustashas episode.
Yeah, it's probably is it our last? Is it our last for the first season?
Probably
it's
not.
never the last.
Yeah. Well, okay.
Just when I think I'm out. You know.
Yeah, I know.
Should we continue talking, or are we going to do a proper introduction to the episode?
We should do a proper introduction, no?
Okay.
Do you mean something like "Welcome to the Empire Never Ended" with Boris, Fritz, and Ray?
Exactly.
Something like that. Yes.
Well, welcome to the Empire Never Ended with Boris, Fritz, and Ray.
Hello.
Hi.
Back with Yugoslav Cop TV.
Yes. Or if we want to be more, if we want to phrase it differently, we're looking at media representations of emigre terrorist groups.
Yeah.
Bad boys.
We watched already a kind of somewhat comparable TV show, which was made in 1982 or 83, right? 83, I think.
Yeah.
In Zagreb TV production.
Yeah.
that was like a 3-part, I think, show. Or maybe no, it was also a 4.
It was also 4, yeah.
Also 4 episodes about Ustasha terrorists who tried already, like in 47, I think, or in 48 to re-enter Yugoslavia and had some crazy idea of taking power there, which failed quite miserably, and more than 90 of them were arrested. This was the famous Operation Guardian, as they called it.
Yeah.
And now we watched another Yugoslav TV show that has 4 episodes, but this time it's a Sarajevo TV production from 85, so 2 years later it was made. But it covers like a much later period. So now we are in 1972.
Yeah.
But the Ustashas are still nuts and they're trying to take power in Yugoslavia.
Yeah, it's their thing. That's the only thing that they do.
Yes.
Be crazy, try to take power in Yugoslavia.
They fail, of course. Although this time they actually, were fighting, at least to some degree. They killed some Yugoslav, cops and, I don't know, soldiers, I guess.
Mm-hmm. And just fucking random ass people and...
Yeah. But it's another crazy idea that Ustashas had of somehow taking power in 1972 in Yugoslavia and starting an armed uprising, which completely failed. And they were, I guess, encouraged by what was going on at that time in Croatia, which was this social movement that we probably referenced before on this podcast, which was called Croatian Spring, which was a kind of a mass nationalist movement, but which was led by actually the Communist Party of Croatia at the time, and so the leadership of the Croatian Republic in Yugoslavia. And it was more kind of framed as a kind of a civic nationalist movement. They were still officially supporters of the communist line. They wanted a greater degree of autonomy and statehood for Croatia. And then I guess these Ustashas were encouraged by this development and thought that, it's a good time for an insurrection, which was not the case.
No.
Even though, people were okay, many of them were nationalists in some sense, but for sure they were not ready to support the Ustasha uprising in 1972 in Yugoslavia, especially because they wanted to start it in Bosnia, which is a kind of a weird idea. I know they claim Bosnia is a part of their independent state of Croatia, but still, the population in Croatia, Croatian population in Bosnia is not that large. I mean, it is significant, but they're only the 3rd biggest ethnicity there. So it's, I don't know, weird.
But overrepresented in the Ustasha movement, right? Pavelic, Luburic, all these guys are from Herzegovina, no? So it might have made sense for them in that sense, but yeah. I mean, we actually talked about this specific incident in, I think, episode 179. We talked about the Croatian Revolutionary Brotherhood. Because that is the organization that is typically credited with trying to launch this spectacular failure of an insurrection. And those guys were, as we mentioned in that episode, particularly crazy, mostly Australia-based, but some of the most kind of extreme line of Ustasha terrorists, as in they really embraced the whole terrorism part and were fine with taking out civilians and the like, whereas some of the other groups tried to, play a softer line.
They were the more fanatical. They kind of broke with the other groups because they, I guess, thought they were not dedicated enough to their cause or something like that.
Yeah, and they looked so bad that, Croatian nationalists today say that it was all a false flag, that it was set up by the Yugoslav government, that they never did any of the things bomb movie theaters and trains and the like, or airplanes, in the case of that episode that we did. But yeah, I mean, they were as infiltrated as any other group, but I would say that the leadership was absolutely as crazy as they've been made out to be.
Yeah. So this TV show is called Brisani Prostor, and have we decided how we want to translate it into English?
Yeah, I think out in the open.
Yeah.
Makes the most sense. It's not a literal translation, but it does imply, because I guess we've established that it comes from military terminology.
Yeah.
Which is, when you're left out in the open with no cover.
Yeah. A more kind of literal translation would be something like empty space or clear space.
Yeah.
So like not a place where you want to be if you're like a guerrilla terrorist group trying to start an uprising in Yugoslavia. So that's kind of the point of that title.
Yeah. Compared to the last show that we watched, though, this is much more engaging and higher quality.
It's the other show is like a meditation, like, as we said, like it just keeps coming around, and at the end, they always give Yozo the water and they all get arrested. And
and it was ridiculously formulaic to the point of comedy. Like, Yozo, give me water. Yeah, they arrest them all, and then like the voiceover narration comes on and tells you who the bad guys are.
We fucked this guy, and this guy. This one it's a momentum that builds into like ultra violence that continues from place to place, and it's more of a linear story for sure.
Well, the first one was like kind of probably not deliberately comedic, but it's kind of very different to make it anything else because of just the nature of the story. Because it's like more than 90 Ustashas coming into Yugoslavia, including some of the leadership, basically on the invitation of the Yugoslav government, who had a radio station and pretended they're like the non-existing Ustasha movement inside of Yugoslavia, invited them, and then just immediately arrested them as soon as they showed up. And that's 4 hours of that is pretty funny. I mean,
this is a fucking murder spree. This is crazy.
Yeah, and this has also like a really kind of A-list cast for the time. Lots of famous actors, some of which we may have talked about in our partisan film episode back in the day. I think we talked about Bata Živojinović.
Definitely.
He's here along with some other
one of the most famous or popular actors in China.
Yes, for his role in Walter Defends Sarajevo, which is a film we talked about well over a year ago now. Maybe
a great film. And if any like newcomers to the show, didn't hear that episode, I think probably just watch that film. It's fucking great. It's easier to find than most of the stuff we talk about here.
But I mean, other guys that are recognizable outside of Yugoslavia too, like Bogdan Diklic is in it, playing one of the roles of the main Ustashas.
Yeah, he was probably the best for me in this.
Yeah, he's a really good actor. He's a pretty versatile actor. Very good at being this kind of stoic, sad guy. But people might know him from, he was in the Bosnian film No Man's Land, which won an Academy Award a decade or so ago. He's been in some other like more recent movies that got play. Outside
his death scene in this thing is very brutal. Like it's
yeah.
He did it very well.
And then also guys like Slobodan Aligrudic, who appeared in Emir Kusturica's first two films. One of which won the Golden Palm, right? The When Father Was Away on Business. And do you remember Dolly Bell? He had leading roles in there. So I mean, much better cast. Much better. It's actually written as a series and not a quasi documentary like the last one. There's dialogue. Some of it's quite funny and well written. So this one was not that big of a struggle to get through. I gotta say, I enjoyed it.
Well, I guess that's it.
That's it.
Yeah. See you guys later.
8 out of 10. Recommend, even though it's not translated.
You want to talk at first a little bit about the actual like historical things that happened? So
if since this is a free episode, I'm guessing that a lot of our listeners who aren't patrons didn't hear the Wadanga Forever Croatian Revolutionary Brotherhood and Yacht 367 episode. So some of this might be new to you, but as we mentioned before, the Croatian Revolutionary Brotherhood, this crazy Ustasha group based out of Australia, tried to launch an insurrection in their base in Australia, was pretty well connected with mainstream Australian politics and the state. They ran training camps in several different kind of remote locations in Australia where they did
camps.
Where they did, weapons training, small arms training, explosives, all that kind of stuff. But of course, they weren't only limited to Australia as well. And the show kind of hints at that, right? It does bring up the whole international nature of these organizations.
Yeah.
For example, one of the founders of the Croatian Revolutionary Brotherhood, this guy Geza Pasti, who was like a pretty fanatical, crazy Ustasha, he was murdered by Yugoslav secret police in France in 1967. So they were getting around, and like we talked about a few times, they were responsible for some of these like really high profile bombings. So like the bombing of Belgrade Movie Theater that killed one person and wounded many others. Bombing of the central train station in Belgrade. The bombing of Yacht Flight 367, which is well known for, of course, the flight attendant Vesna Vulovic, who survived a fall from 30-some thousand feet and still holds the record for longest fall without a parachute. So they were getting busy killing people and civilians largely, and their attempt to launch an insurrection, as Ray mentioned, was inspired by the general political climate at the time, in that they thought that they would get there and have support. They always think this didn't really happen, obviously. So in 1972, they procured weapons in Europe, I believe mostly in Austria, of a variety of, and this is always specified in some of the literature you read about it. They got Western arms, right? They had American and German-made weapons, and they rather, how shall we say this, impulsively decided to enter the country. And it was pretty clear that they thought that something was going to happen and didn't really think it through well enough, which is surprising considering that, they trained for this so long, had, assistance from like members of like the Australian military in earlier periods in like the 60s and early 70s as advisors. You'd think they would have thought this out a little bit better.
Yeah, it was so impulsive, like at least according to the show, I don't know how historical accurate it is, that they entered Yugoslavia 5 days earlier than it was agreed.
Yeah.
Just chomping at the bit there.
The show gives some context or an explanation as to why that is, and I'm not sure that that's even what was happening then. I think that's just they decided to do it and they did it. Or maybe they thought that like there'd be this element of surprise, so that if they were in fact infiltrated, that they could catch the Yugoslav government with their pants down.
Nothing like surprising yourself when you do a highly planned guerrilla operation. That's next level tactics there.
So the actual number of guys that cross the border into Yugoslavia is usually it's between like 19 and 20 something, possibly more, because we don't actually know how many of them were killed. Information around casualty figures on both sides are still kind of contested.
Yeah, I mean the Ustasha emigration, I think they claim, at least from what I watched on YouTube, that it was 19 of them, and that most of them were not how as it was portrayed in this show, like not killed in battle, but captured and then executed after torture and like interrogation. And there are like some like proof, like because I watched this documentary which was produced by some, I don't know, I think one Australian-based group. So obviously, and it was very kind of very pro the Bugojanska group, the Bugojno group. And they interviewed some of the people who were a part of the other side, like who were like a part of the territorial defense or the police at the time, or were mobilized in order to capture the Ustashas. And these people, who are sub-9 old guys now, confirmed that they saw some of these people who were later claimed that they died in fighting. They saw them captured. And there's also some discrepancies in the official dates of their death. Like even in the official Yugoslav state data says that they died a few days later than they would if they died fighting the Yugoslav state.
Right, and the show does kind of try to touch on that a little bit. But yeah, I mean, so in 1972, in June of 1972, this group of 19 or so Ustashas came in and decided to, as we said, launch an insurrection in Bosnia, specifically around the town of Bugojno. And whether or not most of them were killed in battle or were captured, some of them were captured alive and put on trial later, and sentenced to death. At least, like, I think the major guys, the higher ups were sentenced to death, and some of the other guys that were captured were given, lengthy prison sentences. Some of them obviously actually survived and lived long enough to be released in the 90s.
I think one guy who was like very young, possibly even a minor, was not he didn't get a death sentence, and then he served his prison time in Serbia, and then I think in the 80s or like already beginning in the 90s, he was transferred to a prison in Croatia. And then when the war started, he was let out and he joined the Croatian paramilitaries in Bosnia. I think HOS or something like that. But he was killed very soon after that, which is also like a suspicious death. And there are theories about it and so on.
Yeah, I mean, they all have theories about why guys died as soon as they went out into battle. And that it was never that, they died in battle, but, there was a wider conspiracy. Croatia's still controlled by the communists, that kind of thing. And they were like covering their tracks by, killing these guys. So yeah, I mean, this show gives an interesting account of this. Some of it is pretty obvious, like the Yugoslav state's narrative. I mean, all of it is. But it's not as heavy-handed, I think, as the last show that we watched.
Although lots of stoic cops again.
Lots of stoic cops and people like performing their civic duty. By like reporting the movement of these guys, which probably isn't super far off from the truth. I mean, like Yugoslavia in the 70s was a pretty safe and stable society.
Yes, this pro-Ustasha documentary basically said the same thing, that they were like always somehow meeting some UDBA informants everywhere they went. Like people who like would see them and then immediately called, the Yugoslav state security or the cops or something like that.
Right. Because, I mean, you would think that, according to their logic, they should have just joined their side. But like, I'd imagine like the average villager in 1972 sees a bunch of armed guys walking around the woods.
Of course.
They're probably going to call the cops.
Yes.
The local authorities in some way or another.
And especially if they figure out they were Ustashas. Like this wouldn't be like reassuring. Oh, you're Ustashas, then fine. Like,
and shouldn't that tell the Ustashas something? Like if everybody they meet is like, oh, I need to turn you in. Doesn't that tell you that you don't have the base of support you thought you did?
Yeah.
Well, according to the show, they did all get very demoralized.
Yes. Yes, that was satisfying.
I mean, and this is like especially strange in this case because all of these guys were younger, so they actually lived in Yugoslavia, and like some of them were only like migrated out of Yugoslavia for a few years, so they kind of knew the situation, and they were from that area. So it's pretty strange. Why would they think that?
Yeah, but like we said before, and they show this in the show a little bit, like, especially for the guest workers in Germany, Austria, and Western Europe, there was a degree of like very rapid radicalization and kind of brainwashing to some degree with like, Ustasha propaganda. And they show this in the show a little bit. They show like the extortion that like groups like the Croatian Revolutionary Brotherhood used on people who were like working in a factory, and you get your ass beat by them because you're not kicking up money, and they're like, well, the Brotherhood helped you get a job, you owe it to us, and that kind of thing. And that can change a person's perspective rather quickly, no? Especially if you're in kind of isolated immigrant circles, right? You start maybe actually believing the narrative, even though you might know better. And then maybe you're encouraged by some of the news that you're getting from the country, right? There's a mass movement for Croatian rights. So maybe this is the right time, right? And, if all you're reading is, Luburić's newspaper,
right,
can have kind of
it's a
Twitter
your
perception of reality. Yeah, totally.
Tito's eating babies and drinking adrenochrome.
So the show actually, like I said, tries to give some sort of context as to why they went in so rapidly. And according to the show, it's because like the pressure was on, right? Like these Ustasha groups were kind of fucking around a lot in Europe, which is true. They were, and there was increasing like state repression from the places that they were based in, whether it was Germany, as we said before, like some guys even left Germany to go to Sweden because shit was getting too hot for them in Germany.
Right.
And you see that a little bit here. Like it's kind of an odd scene. They're bouncing around like different places. So they're in like West Germany. The show starts off in the Munich airport.
Yeah.
And we've said before, Munich is like a very important place in general for anti-communist emigres during this time period, but particularly.
That's because when you fucking go there and you go to drink at a bar with young people, half of them are wearing goddamn ties. Like, if that doesn't scream anti-communist like hell,
yeah, Bavaria
I don't know
is
what
weird.
does. I fucking hate Munich. I'm sorry to any listeners in Munich. Get out of there.
It is kind of the worst place in Germany now.
Oh, I hate it.
Yeah.
It's pretty, but goddamn.
Yeah,
The vibes are all
it's still
bad
like
there.
very conservative and weird.
The only dudes that I saw actually having fun in Munich were the fucking Balkan immigrant workers that were doing the gardening in their gigantic city parks. They were having a blast.
Mm.
And then this fucking 19-year-old walks by them with a cut suit and tie. Like, God damn.
I do have to make a comment about the beginning of the show because it has this great establishing sequence of like airplanes, Munich airport, and this kind of completely inappropriate saxophone music in the background.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? It's like sexy saxophone, like.
It's 1985 TV, man. Doesn't matter where you are in the world, you gotta have the saxophone.
Yeah, I mean, the last one had like spooky synth music, but this
one too. This one had it too.
It had a little bit of that, but
yeah,
just off the bat with like this hardcore sax music. And so, yeah, I mean, you get this, they bounce around to different places, and at one point they're in Paris where these two cops are investigating a safe house of Ustashas, and they come across a bomb on a timer that kills them, and then it cuts to their sponsors. What did you guys make of the German guys?
I wanted to ask you that, like, because
I wanted to ask you too, because
there are some foreigners there who are like they're like sponsors, as you said, or somehow supporting them, who are foreigners, and they speak in German with them. But I'm not sure if they're supposed to be German or American or what's going on.
Yeah, they were deliberately vague about it, right? They are speaking German, which to a viewer in 1985 signals very particular things, right? Especially if you grew up watching partisan movies and stuff. Germans, bad guys. And they're kind of these very like bougie, they're in this like fancy restaurant and they're in suits and they're speaking German. And I wasn't sure, I had to actually rewatch it a couple times to see if I missed anything, because I'm not sure if they're implying that there's some sort of far-right network sponsors or if they're like German deep state.
Yeah.
It was
like
unclear.
Post-Gelen BND guys or something.
And it could be either, although like
I mean, it can be both, no?
It can be both. Yeah, absolutely. But they're vague about it, and so you see these guys and they're saying, well, look, there's pressure now. The German government has a lot of experience now with counterterrorism because of Baader Meinhof. It's only a matter of time before, they Interpol and the police catch up to your network, right? And then they're like, we support you, but you have to take action now. And they basically tell them, we have everything's ready for you. All you have to do is go.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, again, it's odd because you really don't know who they are.
Which is, deliberate, because they couldn't, they want to imply that these people work for someone more dangerous than they are, but then again, Yugoslavia has good relations with the West, so you can't really
complicated.
Yeah, they can't outright name them. Although, as we've seen before, not just Galen, but in the Muftic episode, we talked about, the German BND's secret police, their role in, working with far-right emigres and the like. And so, I mean, it's clearly a thing. And so, they're not telling us explicitly, but it's more or less implied that it's some sort of far-right state network.
Yeah.
And then they show a little bit of, and this is kind of historically accurate because when they did go in 72, like I said, they came in through Austria and they had established a training camp in Austria as well, since actually a lot of their Australian ones had been pretty much shut down at this point. And this was, the area closest to the border for them to prepare. So there's kind of some interesting sequences there in the show of them, doing things like throwing knives, learning how to plant bombs, coating bullets in strychnine.
Yeah.
And be like, it doesn't matter if we use a low caliber because it's the poison that'll kill them.
Right.
And so you get the sense that they're kind of already like these, ruthless terrorist guys.
Mm-hmm.
And then it goes right before they get sent in. So this is still episode 1. They get a really interesting speech by a Catholic priest. And I think that's probably like ideologically one of the more important moments in the show, right? Because it's a Catholic priest, and so they're implicating the Catholic Church and their connection to Ustash emigre groups, which is very well established and not at all untrue. I mean, no matter whether it's from the rat lines to any of like the major Croatian Ustaša supporting newspapers in the U.S., for example, like Danica in Chicago was supported by the Catholic Church, right?
Covering up the Ustaša space program.
Covering up the Ustaša space program, yeah. So, he gives this motivational speech and he says that, something like, you've been chosen to mark the beginning of the end of this unnatural, blasphemous, detestable creation called communist Yugoslavia, and that this will mark the final end of the anti-national regime of Tito and his atheists. And then of course he also tells them that once they come there, they will be basically welcomed with open arms, and that all true patriots will join their cause.
Catholics believe all sorts of funny things.
That's true.
Yeah. Now, there is something that the show highlights, which I'm not particularly sure how accurate it is, and that's the plan to poison the water supply. It's a major thing, especially in the first episode. They're talking about it a lot, and even the Catholic priest and some of the like other commanders, when they're briefing the guys, they say, tomorrow we'll plant bombs and we'll poison this water supply. And once we do this, in the chaos that ensues, like, you highly trained fighters will take control and you have to be ready to basically start administering a state immediately.
Right. Yeah. I mean, historically, they are experts at that.
Right. It usually helps when, the German army puts you in power, but
maybe they just assumed.
That's the crucial ingredients that they somehow overlooked.
Yeah.
And they needed the Fourth Reich or something like that.
Yeah, they left them back in Germany there at the restaurant.
So I'm not sure, like in the stuff that I've read about the Bugojno group, I haven't really seen much that would suggest that they were or had the capability to poison the water supply. But it doesn't happen in the show, right? It's kind of a crucial plot point, is that that there's this kind of shadowy figure called the Doctor, who is supposed to be getting the poison, that he'll move it into the country himself. And again, you're always kind of struggling to understand the shadowy figures in like up above these, main Ustasha characters that they've established, because there's clearly some sort of network. They're connected with some people. They got this doctor who or calls himself a doctor, and we'll find out later
that happens.
Who he really is.
So.
Yeah, totally. And that he's acquiring poison for the water supply. That does not seem to me to be particularly historically accurate, but I might be wrong too. I might have overlooked it in my research on the subject. Needless to say, they are rushed to do this by their weird German masters, and they decide to go for it. But despite the element of surprise, a little bit of pillow talk gives some information away. And this is also something that just kind of happens randomly. Like, who is that guy and that woman?
First of
all, you can tell it's not American TV because there's nudity.
It's just ass right there. There's just ass
and titties too. Yeah,
yeah, TNA right there on TV. That's Bosnian 1985 television right there.
Yeah.
So two characters that were previously like not really introduced to are like clearly enjoying a moment, a post-coital moment in their bed.
Yeah, and
we discovered that this woman is the ex of some Ustasha, who's part of this group, and that he told her that he's going away and doing some big operation.
Yeah,
and the guy that she's sleeping with, it works for the Yugoslav state for Secret Service.
Yeah, and she's got a type.
And that guy
likes a man in uniform.
Also, like previously, they tried to recruit him, right? The Ustashas did.
Yeah.
So I mean, he's like a Yugoslav worker in Germany who like also works for the UDBA, I guess,
or is at least an informant of some kind. Yeah, and he does his civic duty and phones his handler, who then phones the Sarajevo department of the state police, which is the two characters there, those two big A-list actors, Ali Grudic and Živojinovic, who are kind of the commanders of this of the Bosnian department of Yugoslav state security, or just the police. It's not quite clear to me.
My grandfather was there was an attempt to recruit him for the Ustashas in the 60s, I think, in Munich.
Wow.
He did not want to join.
No.
And then he was also very worried that they will find out about his history, because that probably would kill him immediately if they did.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a stressful time.
God damn. Yeah.
He was just wanted to work. He was a gastarbeiter,
right?
Yeah, what?
That's at work, right? So on top of already having to deal with having a job,
he was trying
half
to
of your coworkers want to murder you.
Yeah. He was trying to make some money, send it back to Yugoslavia, and then that happens.
God damn.
But I mean, this is how they work, right? I mean, they come to people in like factories and stuff and be like, we can help you out.
Yeah.
There's a little something you got to do in exchange. And sometimes that might be, it's usually kicking up money, but maybe, they'll be like, plant a bomb in this cafe, or kill the ambassador. One of those things.
Yeah. I mean, the reason they were like, he was afraid that they will find out about his history is because he was in the partisans, but before he was in the partisans, he was recruited and mobilized into the independent state of Croatia military, like not the Ustashas, but like
the regular army.
The regular army. And then he deserted and joined the partisans, which, that's an immediate death sentence for them. Right. But he not only did he do that, he did it in a kind of spectacular way, because he was a pilot. And he was like, he read Flash Gordon in the 30s.
Right on.
He was a kid and he wanted to be a pilot, so he became one. Unfortunately, at the beginning on the side of the Third Reich. And then he was kind of, he was very young. He was a kid, basically. And then he decided he's going to switch sides, and he stole his plane, which was like a Stuka plane, and joined the partisans like that, and kind of,
That is style. Yeah, that's good.
After he got into trouble his whole life. And so after the war, he was, in the Yugoslav military, and he was a flight instructor immediately after the war. And he was apparently a flight instructor for some younger Albanians. Yugoslavia was still, in good relations with Albania. And then they kind of did his move and stole their planes and flew into Italy, and stayed there. Which got my granddad into lots of trouble. So yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you're from pilot stock, huh?
Well, yeah, for some time, and then mostly like he was in and out of jail for lots of period of his life for being kind of for silly things.
Well, this explains your devil-may-care attitude.
I guess so. Yeah.
Guy sounds like a legend.
Totally.
I mean, yeah, he was interesting.
I mean, that's the way to do it. I mean, pilots were in pretty high demand back then, So when you get a pilot over on your side, that's a big deal.
Sure.
The partisans did have their own little air fleet too.
Do you know if he had a cool nickname?
I don't know. He probably did. Yeah.
Flash.
I don't know.
Yeah, Flash. Oh yes.
So yeah, back to the show.
Okay.
So I think one of the crucial components of this show is establishing the characters or establishing the idea of, an unsupportive populace to the Ustashas, and they get to that right off the bat, like as soon as these guys come into the country, and they do it with this very lovable character of this truck driver and a Slovenian hitchhiker. And as soon as I saw like how the dialogue was going, and that they're like singing song, joking around. I could have been a fucking singer, but like, I fucked around too much and now it's too late and I'm fucking stuck driving this truck. And I knew immediately something bad was going to happen to them. But what I didn't know that they were going to use this character as kind of an archetype for the responsible citizen, right? Yeah. As like a responsible citizen and anti-Ustasha, right? So, these guys are just driving along in their truck, and I think I noticed some product placement there. Did you notice that, Ray? The truck is a Radenska truck.
Okay.
Which is a mineral water company from Slovenia. Okay. It is 1985. I feel like it probably was deliberate. There's some other product placement later on, too. Like the guy has a Camel cigarette case. Not like the cigarettes, but like a metal cigarette case that says Camel. Anyway, it was very prominently featured, so I figured it wasn't accidental. But yeah, this poor truck driver is just having fun talking to this young Slovenian hitchhiker. They get stopped by the Ustashas, who have, just crossed the border, and they hijack their truck. And they rough them up a little bit and put them in the back with the rest of the guys, who are all armed to the teeth and ready to go. And there's an interesting scene there. Again, a moment where you can tell it's not American television because there's a lot of cursing in this show.
Yeah.
Very, very juicy curse words are thrown about. And so they're there, and the Ustashas are like kind of poking at this Slovene guy a little bit, and they're like, saying kind of misogynistic stuff like, "Oh, my fourth wife was Slovene, and they're pretty wild. Is your bitch wild too?" Like they're saying all this like kind of misogynist stuff, and it's making them uncomfortable. And then they're like, "Sing a song for us." Like, Slovenes sing a song. And so they sing a song, typical song about, Zagreb. And then they launch into this Ustasha song, like straight up. They all just, Ante Pavelic, something, something, something. And it's at this point that the truck driver finally says something, and he interrupts their song and sings, "Fuck you all in the ass," or whatever.
Yeah, he changes the lyrics of the song.
Changes lyrics to be like, "Fuck you in the ass."
Yeah.
And they beat the shit out of him, obviously. But, when they stop to, whatever, get food and gas, he does the responsible thing and, goes to the bathroom and writes in his own blood, right? A message on the wall, which is also funny too. It's a funny message that he writes, right? Like it's not, "I've been captured, please call for help." It says something like, band of crazy Ustashas armed to the teeth, planning on starting an insurrection in Bosnia. How do you even translate "jebo ih čača ludi"?
Well, yes. I don't know. Yeah,
literally, it's like fuck their crazy fathers.
Yeah, although it's like their crazy father fucking them.
Fucking them, yeah. The dad is doing the fucking, not the other way around.
Their crazy father is fucking.
Balkan curses. A lot of complexity there.
But I
That's
really
a lot to write with your blood in an emergency.
I know, right?
clearly inspired. I mean, he was, I guess, a singer,
call for help
lyricist of some sort. Yes.
He wrote all of that out.
So apparently this was not how it was in reality.
I didn't think so.
I think according to this documentary, but they had some
Ustasha documentary though, right?
It was a documentary, true. But there was an interview with the truck driver. Like they didn't made. It was like a recording of him describing what happened, which you see that's a big difference.
Mm-hmm.
He lived, unlike in the film.
Yeah, spoiler alert. This dude gets it. Yeah.
And he was a Slovenian guy. There was no separate Slovenian guy. The truck driver was Slovenian, and they did let him go.
I mean, but yeah, this character,
which was their mistake because he immediately notified the cops.
Right. He just didn't do it in his own blood and get killed by them. I mean, but he's kind of a more important character in the sense of what's not said about him. Like, so when they're looking, he doesn't want to talk to them. He's very hesitant to even say anything until he starts cussing them out. And they take his ID card. It says he was born in 1941 in Stara Gradiška, which is obviously location of one of the Ustasha's, concentration camps. So, I mean, he plays an ideological role. He's supposed to be this guy who knows who they are, right, immediately, and is just like, fuck them, right? And his character up until his death is this very kind of heroic, but everyman kind of guy, right? He cusses them out every time he gets. They're trying to figure out what to do with him once they discover that he wrote this message, because they do discover that he wrote this message. Yes. And he's just telling them basically, fuck you guys. Yes. I know who you are, and if the tables were turned, I wouldn't have a problem dispatching you. I mean, he's saying that he's just cussing them out, and then they finally kill him when he's trying to escape.
I do like how filthy-mouthed the archetypal good citizen is in the Yugoslav imagination.
I mean, it's odd how not filthy-mouthed the average in classic Hollywood the average American is, because that's just not correct. They just have weird Protestant notions of
we're all respectability
and and then you can't say bad words on television.
Well, fudge that.
Fudge that indeed.
Fudge
so
that
he dies, obviously, and the young Slovene guy also kind of plays that role, because they're talking to him, and they're like, "Are you a member of the Communist Party?" And he's like, "Yes, I am." And then they're like, "Aha, so you're a communist?" He's like, "Not all members of the party are communists, and I joined on my own free will because nobody has ever offered me anything better." So this is kind of literally the party line.
But being represented. I mean, it's also weird because you are supposed to be a communist if you're a member of the Communist Party. It is kind of weird because there were organizations for people who are not communists and who kind of support the system and something like this. But this is a weird thing, because he says I've joined of my free will, but I'm not a communist. It's well, I don't know.
Yeah, it's an interesting ideological moment in the show.
Yeah.
And they don't really quite know what to do with him either, because they're just having their minds blown by that.
Basic complexity is pretty dangerous for any Nazi, really.
Yeah.
It's always a big threat.
So the way that these guys are portrayed, and I think that's probably not far off from the truth, and considering what we've read about some of these other guys, is totally believable. They're fanatical, misogynist, and alcoholic. They are constantly drinking in the show. Yes. Do you notice that they always have a flask? They're always and it's the Ustasha guys in particular. They're always drinking.
Yeah.
Which, as we know from Kavaya episodes.
Sure.
Those were Chetniks, though.
Those are Chetniks, but this is, this is a kind of similar moment for them, right?
It's also clearly an addiction because they do it in situations where they shouldn't, or like under fire, and the dude will take out his flask and take a swig, and hiding from people, they'll do it.
Yeah,
all the time. Yeah,
but yeah, I mean that's how they're portraying them. And it even leads to one guy's death, right? Like later on, the guy who robs those peasants and just starts drinking their liquor, and the peasants have the horse kick him in the head.
Yeah. One guy is killed by a horse.
It's a great scene. And then later on, when the Udba guys are talking about it, they're like, and this might be a reference to the fact that a bunch of them were executed after being captured. And they'd be like, well, if we told them that he was killed by a horse, nobody would believe us.
Yeah. So we should just say that he was killed in a confrontation with the locals or something like that.
Yeah.
Well, sure. I mean, this was a symbolic example of equine citizenship in Yugoslavia.
Yes.
If a Nazi tries to steal your booze, you kick him in the head.
Yeah.
It's a weird moment too, because it's like right after one of these battles, and the guys, comes across these guys in the middle of the woods, these two guys with a horse, and the horse is stocked with booze, and he just starts straight up just facing bottles of liquor. Like he's, chugging it. Like he's putting one down, then the other one, then they're like, yeehaw, horse, and the horse kicks him.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if you didn't know that they were the bad guys by the fact that they're, mistreating, hardworking citizens and drinking, being assholes to people, they ramp it up a little bit more beyond just the murder. And that's, of course, this bizarre rape scene that happens in episode 3, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty traumatic. It's rough. Yeah.
Yeah, in that scene, so they're behind enemy lines or deep in Yugoslavia, and they are starting to. Some of the guys who are from that area are going back to their homes, right? And one of them finds his ex-wife who had remarried with a cop, and he then rapes his ex-wife, in a very, very strange sequence. Because he comes in and she's like, I thought you were dead. And he's like, you remarried, blah, blah, blah. Who's this guy? And she has a portrait of her husband who's a cop. She's like, keeps saying he's a good man. And ever since he came around, there's been no bloodshed here in this town or whatever, blah, blah, blah. And then he's raping her and she's saying, tell me that he's a good man. Just tell me that he's a good man. It's very fucked up and weird. I don't know how you guys felt about that sequence.
Yeah. Uncomfortable. Deeply uncomfortable.
I mean, rape scenes always are, but this one,
yes,
just the way that it played out it's very unusual and strange.
Yeah.
I mean, I think she was looking for a confirmation from the guy that he won't kill her husband.
Won't kill her husband.
Right.
That's what I
and then he does
as well, but he does anyway, of course. But not before, this other dude comes in and there's this whole other repeat event. It's really rough. It's
no, it's brutal. It's brutal for
rough.
TV.
And also, this woman's revenge never comes.
Yeah, such scenes are I have to say, not uncommon in Yugoslav cinema. Yugoslav have some issues, I would say. Not only there's often rape scenes, but there are also these very kind of rapey sex scenes that leave you confused. What is going on? I don't know. Very, very often. Much more often than something that's not like that.
Yeah.
When it comes to portraying sex, it's very fucked up.
Yeah, and unfortunately, you keep waiting for some sort of justice moment for her, and it doesn't happen.
No, it just gets weirder and worse.
It gets even weirder because the whole next episode is called Conflict, and that's when the showdown really happens, and the police guys are triangulating their location and sending helicopters. There's all this kind of cool footage of helicopters and
and it's visually striking too, because a lot of this you've been shown horses and carts and trucks from the 40s, 50s that are still around, and then suddenly you've got a gleaming 1970s helicopter swooping around the forest, and it's
not just
cool.
one. Like there's that one scene. There's
cavalry.
like 6. Yeah, it's like a Vietnam War film. And I think that's deliberate too. I mean, this is supposed to be like portraying the state as being like, you know, a modern police force, a modern state.
Yeah,
you know, with
definitely did that, and basically like
using
you've got
all their
these
resources. You know?
Yeah, you've got these like throwback guerrillas wandering around, you know, murdering people, and suddenly like the state arrives in full force, and like it's really clear what's about to happen. Like there's no, just by seeing this armada of helicopters, you're instantly aware that this whole project was completely ridiculous. They're completely outclassed, and like the Yugoslav state is highly modern, efficient, and ready to go, you know.
And also, like, on the one hand, like, using all this, like, high-tech resources, and, like, later on when they show, like, when they're looking up who each guy is, they have, like, some computers in the, you know, like, it's very much like a cop show in that kind of sense.
Yeah.
But then also, like, Slobodan Aligrudić's character, who's, like, whatever, the chief of the local, like, Sarajevo police or whatever, he says something like, if insurrection... they want insurrection, we have to respond with insurrection as well. And so that's like when they, you know, because they arm like locals and like the territorial defense units are mobilized. So it's both. It's both like the people there and like the efficient high-tech state.
Yeah. Yeah. Although the state wasn't that efficient at the time, there were no like special military units at the time in Yugoslavia. And exactly after this, they decided they will need them. So
yeah. And I noticed that he says, like, when they're talking about what kind of police forces they need, they're like, we have to mobilize the special units or whatever. There were no special units in in 1972,
but they were founded in the 70s, I think.
But afterwards, right? Yeah. So this is them.
Interesting.
This is them in the 80s saying that existed when it didn't.
Yeah.
And in fact, like, I think most of the casualties on the Yugoslav government side were from like these kind of poorly armed territorial defense guys that they mobilized to like comb the woods.
So the pro-Ustasha documentary, like how they frame it is that the Ustashas were kind of bummed out that the Yugoslavs mobilized locals who they thought of as just good people, and they didn't consider them enemies. So after some time, they decided to abort their action and like just leave because they didn't want to kill ordinary people, which is like total bullshit.
Yeah, Ustashas hate killing ordinary people.
Yeah, that's like
the last thing on their mind.
Yes, especially the ones who are like working for the commies.
Yugoslavia. Yeah. Yes, live and let live. That's what Pavelić said.
Always.
Yeah, but I mean, at this point, like, so all of episode 3 and most of episode 3 is called Conflict, and it is just mostly just the showdowns, and you know, they're all getting kind of their asses kicked and like losing their minds and starting to be very disappointed that they were sent into this killing zone with no cover, and that they thought, you know, they were misled. But in the process, of course, they kill some more civilians. They kill a child.
Yep.
Kind of randomly, and then the Yugoslav police guys get to go to the father and say, "We're going to get justice," in a good kind of television moment.
Mm-hmm.
But the final episode is interesting to me for a lot of reasons, right? That one's titled Justice, right? Or Punishment. Punishment,
yeah.
And it starts with like all these sad Ustashas in the woods. Bogdan Diklić's character is like, I've had enough. I'm gonna get out of the country, like, and go confront the guys who sent me here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And throughout this, both the police and the Ustasha guys talk about these people who sent them there in these very vague terms, right? There are these shadowy figures, but they're also backed by somebody else, and that's always kind of implied. And so, yeah, even the guys on the ground are like, I'm going to go back and confront them because, you know, they sent us to our deaths.
Uh-huh.
And then he does he pulls a James Mason and criticizes the other guys for giving themselves too many titles and medals before they even got there.
Yeah. Yeah, because like he's like basically now in rebellion and like doing things outside of the hierarchy they have. But he says, I don't care. Like you gave yourself all of these titles like before we even came here. Like fuck your titles.
Yeah. But then of course we do get like their group does more or less get broken up. There's some dramatic death scenes and this, that, and the other thing. But then like the wheels of justice start to turn, and there's some kind of interesting moments. Did you notice the only use of like voiceover narration in this show? It's not even narration. Mm-hmm. It's a strange kind of sequence where one of these Ustasha terrorists, is kind of lying in the woods by himself, and a voice comes on of like a judge or a cop or something listing this guy's affiliations with these different terrorist groups, Ustasha terrorist groups, who have, done things like kill the ambassador Adolovic and guest workers in a cafe in Hamburg, and that they're armed and dangerous and should be apprehended alive, but not at any cost. And it's very weird because it's the only time it kind of breaks the story in that way, right? Like everything's happening in real time, and then this guy is lying there and realizing that he's about to be punished for his crimes.
Yeah.
And it comes in this very like kind of godlike voice.
I was confused by that. What was going on? I wasn't sure.
It was God.
Yeah.
And then another interesting moment there is that the press conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the cops have a press conference.
An international press conference.
International. Yeah. They have a translator, and it's like almost documentary style, because they like you hear like the question and then the translation of the question, then the answer, then the translation of the answer. It's kind of weird.
And there's two fixed camera angles, and it feels like C-SPAN a little bit in this way. You know?
But it's part of this. It is interesting that they decided to do that, right? To put that in the show as like a kind of major thing, because even a couple episodes before, when the Yugoslav police are trying to figure out how to catch these guys, they're like, well, tomorrow the whole world is going to be talking about these people, and so we have to put them on trial and find out who's behind them. And then they have this press conference.
And then invade Germany or something like that.
And then invade Germany. Take Vienna. I mean, Graz is Slovenian anyway, right? But they don't reveal who's behind it, right?
Mm-mm.
They have this press conference, and you don't really learn anything else. He just kind of schools the foreign like press on the situation and like how dangerous these people are, and that's it, right? Like it's not. There isn't some better explanation.
Maybe it's a message, like a warning.
It was like the point of that in the show was that like when the French journalist asked like, don't you think like you overdid it, like so many thousands of forces against just a few people, and the cop answers, no, it's not a few thousands, it's like millions, because all of the Yugoslavs are participating or something like this.
Slick.
Yeah, and then he says something also. I mean, he says this earlier too. It's not a problem for us to like handle this like group of idiots, but they can like spread seeds that are dangerous to us or something. And so all of that happens, and then we discover then there's a big twist at the end.
Yeah.
And
because parallel to this, we kind of sometimes see what the bosses are doing. Not like the foreign bosses, but like some Ustasha higher-ups who are like not in battle, but are somehow infiltrated in the Yugoslav society, I guess. And so we can see that as well.
Or in Western Europe, right? Like the higher-ups.
But they're also now two, and then later the third guy comes to Yugoslavia, right? And they're like, they were supposed to prepare something, but like they're mostly fighting among each other how the situation is not developing well, and blaming each other who is its fault, why did they came 5 days earlier before we said they should come, and so on.
Yeah, and looming behind all of this is this figure of the doctor, who's one of these major guys, and you know, he decides to come back to Yugoslavia to like sort things out, and he comes. It's a great like guest worker depiction. He comes in like a fancy Benz.
Yeah.
You know, and it like does like a close up of the Mercedes logo. And he like is driving around. And he's in this like kind of corny white suit.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That like you'd expect some fucking dude to be wearing that came, you know, from working in Germany or whatever. And there's a final showdown between like the last surviving member of the group confronting the doctor. And the doctor's there in his white suit in front of a Benz. And he's like, why did you send us out? And then the reference to the name of the show. Why'd you send us out in the open to like, you know, like sheeps for slaughter or whatever. And then we find out that the doctor is actually a Yugoslav secret police guy.
Yeah.
And he reveals all this information. He pulls a gun on him and he, you know, basically tells him, yeah, that's me. And then these helicopters land and Bata Živojinović and everybody else gets out. They're all shaking hands. And he's like, do you have a domestic cigarette? Like, blah, blah, blah. And he's like, I'm just a guest worker. And they're like, you're not. Now you've returned or something.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where the show ends. It's
yeah. And it's also very funny because when he arrests the last Ustasha, he tells him like, do you remember that guy that you like the guy that you killed, the Udba guy that you killed in Australia? Well, you should know that like Udba always sends at least 2 men or something like this. Mm-hmm. So he, you know, so he's the other guy.
Yeah. Oh, and then he goes, and it hasn't been called Udba for a long time. And that's like right when the helicopter descends.
Yeah.
And the credit sequence is that like, so all these guys are shaking hands and they're like basically like, ha ha ha, we lured these stupid Ustashas to their deaths. And then it just cuts to a close up of the Ustasha in handcuffs, just his hands in handcuffs, and then it rolls the credits over that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this, like, according to these pro-Ustasha documentary makers, this was kind of the invention of the Yugoslav state, that narrative about the doctor, because it was, like, I don't know if it was present, like, in that form as the doctor character, but there was lots of, like, Yugoslav publications about this case that insisted on the 20th man, as they call him, because there were 19 of them, and then there was the 20th man who was like an Udba guy all along, working for them and infiltrating the group. So there was lots of publications. I think there was even a book called The 20th Man or something like this about this case. So these pro-Ustashas say that like that's like completely fabricated, invented, which might be true because apparently, you know, the state didn't realize these Ustashas are in Yugoslavia, and like only like days later, like when they were already in Bosnia, you know, which is a pretty like very deep in the territory of Yugoslavia. So
I was a little bit confused by the revelation that the doctor is actually an agent, because obviously they made it in kind of a funny way to be like, ha ha ha, we did infiltrate you, you stupid bastards. But then if that were true, why even let them get that far in?
Yeah, probably.
Right? Why didn't they arrest them at the border? Like, I mean, they killed a bunch of innocent people, for fuck's sake. You know what I mean? It doesn't seem like a good look that if you were that deeply embedded and had that level of infiltration that you would let them get that far. Right? It
doesn't make sense. No,
it doesn't. It doesn't particularly make sense. It makes for a badass moment in the show.
Yeah. Like if that was true, then this would be another like the previous show that we watched. It would be a boring, repetitive comedy, like where they just get into Yugoslavia and get arrested, and then that's it.
Maybe it was trying to pitch a spin-off series of like gastarbeiteri, you know, anti-fascists that just dress.
Also, like if this was this was like true, the guy like that would be someone like Arkan who was like he's who did that kind of work for them in abroad, and similar people to him, not a doctor.
Yeah. It was it did actually take me by surprise, because I was actually expecting that the doctor was like a shadowy commander guy, and that he was going to kill the Ustasha and escape, and that there would be like always kind of a permanent enemy like lurking in the background.
Yes.
That's what I expected when that
because that would make sense.
That scene started.
With the rest
that would
of the
make
movie.
sense, because then you'd have like you'd have a villain like that would live on, right?
Yeah.
Instead, it was a haha, no, fuck you.
Yeah. I just have to mention the death scene of like the Bogdan Diklic character. He's the one who kind of rebels against the others and says, "Fuck your titles, I'm gonna go home and whatever." And then he ends up like separated from the rest of the group and like he's caught in like a bear trap.
Oh right.
And that's like and while the enemy's approaching and you can hear their dogs barking, and it's pretty horrific. And the way he acts in that scene is very, very, very good. Like total like desperation and just horrible pain. Yeah. And then he decides to kill himself with a gun that he had. So it was very, very brutal, I would say, but very well done.
Yeah, I mean, there's actually it's a pretty brutal show, honestly. Like, there's a lot of violence that, that was the show that kills the dog, for example, with that big dagger.
Yeah,
all kinds of stuff in there.
The fucking dagger.
Well, I mean, they failed, but what? 6 years after this show was made, there was a war in Yugoslavia.
Yeah, exactly what I thought.
Yeah,
and it wasn't started by Ustashas. It was like started by either mostly like ex-communists on all sides. Not like Ali Izetbegovic was never a communist, but. Milosevic Tuđman was a general, a partisan.
Uh-huh.
So, I mean, if it was up to Ustashas, they wouldn't have a chance. But unfortunately, it was a much more complicated story.
Yeah, no, I couldn't help but thinking that in watching this, because it's like, it's 85, and then, it ends on this kind of triumphant note.
Yeah.
And then in the back of my mind, I'm just thinking like, well, 6 years later, a bunch of those emigres come back, but not as, returning collaborators of Yugoslav Secret Service, but as like Ustashas or Chetniks or whatever.
Croatian Revolutionary Brotherhood basically evolves into HOS.
Yeah. We mentioned that in that episode, but one of their final leaders in Australia came back to found the most well-known right-wing paramilitary.
Like a straight-up Ustasha paramilitary that fought in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Yeah. So I mean, they kind of won in some sense.
In some bizarre sense. Although many of them didn't think so. Like what's the name? The Zvonko Bušić, who was very depressed about what Croatia is and killed himself.
Kavaja too, on the Serbian side, drank himself kind of death because of that. And
so no one won, I guess.
Nobody won. There it is. Yeah. Yay.
Yes. Well, yeah.
All in all, though, happy we watched this one. It was a lot easier to get through than.
Yeah. I have to say I liked the other one also. It was very kind of relaxing, the repetitive thing.
Right.
Yeah, but on the 4th hour, it's like, okay. This at least had me guessing up until the very end.
Yeah,
it was well written, well acted.
Especially dynamic with the last one.
Yeah. The fighting one was really kind of whatever for me, but
yeah.
The last one's good.
Yeah, this is kind of almost kind of a neo-partisan like film show in some sense, except in some kind of bizarre way where the partisans are Ustashas.
Yeah,
and it's strange. Yeah.
Yeah, but they're clearly bad guys. They kill mostly civilians.
No, they are bad guys. That's what I'm saying. It's bizarre, but it's like unlike the first show. There's like fighting in the woods of Bosnia, which is usually like what partisan movies portray.
Yeah.
It's also kind of interesting that they are not like the way the show portrays the Ustashas is not. They don't always portray them as cowards. Like there are some cowardly moments, but they are pretty courageous, which is interesting. But kind of nuts. I mean, and some are straight up psychos.
Yeah, but I think it's like some are psychos and the others are misguided.
Yeah,
I think that's kind of the message there. And you see that more when they start realizing how fucked over they got.
Yeah.
And like realizing the futility of everything.
And it's interesting, like how they like the most effective way the show portrays how when they kind of when Ustashas realize that maybe they are like in the wrong, the things in Yugoslavia are not as they thought. Like, not only in the sense that, like, okay, they have much more weapons than they thought that they will have and so on, but like is when they are hiding in some bush and then a bus stops there full of like high school children who are like very cheerful. The bus stops for the kids to drink water. And then and all the kids are like singing and they're cheerful. And some of the Ustasha guys says, those are like high school students probably going to like the seaside or something like that. And then they go away and then you see the faces of these Ustashas kind of being miserable in those bushes. And like, and listening to those kids sing and thinking like, oh, like, what are we doing here exactly?
Right, exactly.
Yeah. That's actually a really good moment in the show. And they're all like bloodied up and like lying in the like ditch. Like, yeah.
I really like this idea though of like a spin-off series of some 1970s Gastarbeiter Secret Service agents, you know, that are like hunting Ustasha in Europe, and then when they get to their base, like they drive the Benz up to like a 4-story concrete house that's only half constructed with like concrete lions in the front lawn, you know, and the driveway dips under into this underground base, and I think it'd be fucking sweet.
Yeah,
that would be sweet. And yeah, with like a
saxophone big, like, all the time.
No, I was gonna say like prominent like disco soundtrack.
Oh yes, absolutely. It would be fucking rad. I would love that.
And the soundtrack for this I like as well.
Would they have a room with like axes that they use to kill Chetniks and?
Oh yes, yes, and their children, of course.
Their children. Yeah.
I mean, the sledgehammer.
The Ustasha documentary made a point that like after this there was like much more killing of like prominent Ustashas abroad by Udba.
Yeah,
and one 9-year-old girl was killed as well.
There you go.
So it's Udba style.
Udba style. That's the name of the show.
Yeah.
All right, boysies.
All right. Yeah. I think that's probably it for our media episodes for a little bit. No?
Yes, I think so. I don't know. We had some music ideas, but...
yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see.
Yeah.
What was it? Listening to the neo-folk songs again, but in reverse to find like religious messages. Secret socialist messages if you play it in reverse.
Yeah.
I would be happy to not listen to neo-folk ever again. Well,
yes.
At least not in the immediate future.
All right, guys.
All right.
Well, see you back in the F-Files on the other side of the paywall there.
Oh, Jesus.
Oh, yeah.
All right.
It's a tough climb. All right.
Dude. All right.
See you
Bye.
later.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey there, Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.